Jay Vardy.
Jay Vardy.
This Jay Vardy.
Jay Vardy. Thank you, Jay Vardy.
Jay Vardy.
Jay Vardy. Oh, Jay Vardy. Oh my gosh.
Hello everybody, welcome to this video. It is currently 1:21 a.m. on January 28th, 2025. The go-home Raw before the 2025 Royal Rumble happened, just a few hours ago. It ended approximately 3 hours ago. And I want to do a different type of video before the Royal Rumble. It's something I've been thinking about quite a lot lately, and you can see it here on this slide and in the title of this video. Who's next in line? So I really want to take a look at a subject of who could be the next top star in the WWE and the world of professional wrestling. And I don't simply mean the next world champion. I don't simply mean the next person to main event WrestleMania. At this stage in WWE's history, WWE and WWF's history, there have been a lot of world champions. At this stage in WrestleMania history, we're entering WrestleMania 41. There have been a lot of WrestleMania main eventers. I'm talking about who is that bona fide, undisputed, #1 top star that transcends pro wrestling. And let's really focus on what that means to transcend pro wrestling, because in my opinion, by this definition, and I think you'll agree with the four that I identify, there have only been four major top stars who are both undisputedly the #1 star in the WWE and WWF at the time, the undisputed #1 star in the world of professional wrestling when they were #1 in WWE and WWF, and they were a star that was bigger than pro wrestling itself. Like, they were a mainstream star as a pro wrestler, not after leaving pro wrestling or not being a mainstream star because of something else other than pro wrestling. No, they were a mainstream star as a pro wrestler. They were the top star in the company. They were undoubtedly the top star in the entire world of professional wrestling, and they were mainstream stars as wrestlers. Like I said before, there have been a lot of world champions. There have been a lot of people to main event WrestleMania. That doesn't necessarily mean you were the guy, in quotations. I'm doing quotations, but I don't have my camera on, at this type of level. And I'll give a couple examples. And as much as I love both of these stars, let's use Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels as examples. Now, in terms of talent, in terms of their ability, in terms of their skill, just in terms of their overall performance in their careers, how talented are those guys? How great are those guys? Both of them are top 10 of all time, without a doubt. Both of them are arguably top 5 stars of all time, and you can make a strong argument for either one of them as being the best of all times in terms of the ability of being a pro wrestler. However, neither of them really transcended the sport. You know what I mean? Neither of them really transcended the world of pro wrestling into being huge mainstream stars as pro wrestlers. And if you look at the era where Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels were the top 2 guys, it was first Bret and then Shawn. The era that came before them and the era that came after them both had a star that transcended, the world of pro wrestling to levels that they never really came close to. And again, I'm not talking about their talent or their ability, because in terms of who that predecessor and successor was, both of them are better than the 2 guys that, one of them came before them and one of them came after them. Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart are more talented than both of those men, but both of those men, and I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, and we're going to get to them in a second when I switch sides, but both of them were undisputedly the top star in the WWF and /WWE, now WWE, but at the time WWF. They were undisputedly the top star in the entire world of professional wrestling, and they were huge global mainstream stars as pro wrestlers that really kind of transcended the sport itself. Um, I think currently Cody Rhodes is more of a Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. I think Cody Rhodes had probably the best WrestleMania victory maybe in history. And I've been watching, WWE consistently since the era of like WrestleMania 18. So I've been watching WWE for like 22 years now, over 22 years now. And in my opinion, I think Cody Rhodes may have had the greatest, WrestleMania main event victory in the entire history of WrestleMania. But I see him more as a Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart type. I think in the world of professional wrestling, right now he is undoubtedly the guy. He's undoubtedly the best overall wrestler in the business right now, and that's why he's champion. And he had an incredible story leading up to being champion. But I think he's probably peaked. I think I think there probably isn't any higher for Cody Rhodes to go than what he is now. And I just don't see him being, a star to the level of the four guys I want to talk about. At least, maybe he'll prove me wrong, but in terms of his age and in terms of how long he's been in the business, I think he's peaked. I think he's more of a Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart type rather than, the four guys that we're going to get into. But I want to talk about these four people that I think really define what I mean by being the top of the line. And, that's going to lead in the subject of who's next in line, because that's what this video ultimately is answering is who is next in line. And I have 7 choices who I think could possibly be that next huge breakout star. But I also want to mention the fact that the WWE is in a very interesting era right now, and it's in a place that I've never seen it in since the Attitude Era. And that is, right now, the WWE seems to really be having the mindset of we're trying to make everybody into a star. We're trying to make everybody over with the audience. We want the bottom of the card, the middle of the card, and the top of the card to be pretty indistinguishable from one another because we want all sections of the card to feature stars. We want everybody to be over, and we're trying to have everybody involved. And I haven't seen the WWE operate this way since the Attitude Era. Everybody says like, oh, the Attitude Era just had a lot more stars than, more recent eras. It wasn't necessarily that they had more stars. It was just that the company was kind of, even though they had Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, who were undoubtedly the guys, and one of those guys was even more undoubtedly the guy, they didn't just build the shows around them. They tried to have everybody over from the bottom of the card through the top of the card. They tried to make everybody into stars so that they could easily push people up the card as needed. Currently, WWE is now operating that way, something they haven't done since the Attitude Era, because in the John Cena era, the entire show was built around him. In the Roman Reigns era, the entire show was built around him. And it's not like they didn't have a mid card and they didn't have a lower card during those eras. It's just that they weren't prioritized to the level that they're being prioritized right now under, Triple H's leadership. Triple H seems to understand that you need to have a strong low card, you need to have a strong mid card so that, as top talents either get injured or they get older or, they leave to go do something else like Hollywood, which is now a legitimate worry that WWE has is once they, build stars to being, super, super top levels, they're going to bail on wrestling for Hollywood, which is a legitimate worry that the company has. But one of the ways they're countering that is they're making sure they have a strong card throughout so that they can constantly elevate talent up, which makes this a very hard thing to predict of who's next in line. However, I do think there are 7 options. But before we get to that, let's flip this slide and let's look at who basically the main 4, top of the line talent in, the company's history have ever been. Now, without a doubt, Hulk Hogan was a star that transcended the world of professional wrestling. WrestleMania was built on his shoulders. He was without a doubt the top guy for many, many years in the company. There was never anyone truly at his level. And his immediate successors, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, never really came close to reaching his level. The next person to really reach that level and maybe even go beyond what Hulk Hogan did was Stone Cold Steve Austin. Many people regard Stone Cold Steve Austin as the biggest professional wrestler in the history of professional wrestling in terms of his star power and in terms of the money that he was grossing and bringing into the company through, ticket sales, pay-per-view sales, merchandise sales, all that. Many people say Stone Cold Steve Austin is the top grossing professional wrestler of all time in terms of being a draw, but he was the face of the Attitude Era. He was a huge, huge star. He was the first star to really reach Hulk Hogan type levels after the era of Hulk Hogan. Then the next in line was John Cena. And my opinion is that John Cena did never quite hit the levels of Austin and Hogan, but he was definitely the next one in line. And, you know, he may there are arguments to say he's at their level, but there's also arguments to say that he isn't at their level, but without a doubt he was the next one in line. And we mentioned how there was Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart in between Hogan and Austin. Well, in between Austin and Cena, you had Brock Lesnar, and we all kind of know how that went. We don't need to get fully into it, but for a while there, we had Brock Lesnar, who looked like, maybe, but Brock Lesnar ended up being an in-between guy 2 times in his career because he was also an in-between guy in between Cena and Roman. But John Cena, without a doubt, was the face of the company, and he was a talent that kind of transcended the sport in the sense that he was really the only talent of his era that had any sort of mainstream appeal. You could go up to people on the street and say, like, do you know who John Cena is? And they would say yes. But if you said, do you know who Edge is? The likelihood that people who aren't wrestling fans are going to say, yeah, I know who Edge is. Maybe if they watched during the Attitude Era, they would know him from the TLC matches. But if you go up to them and say, do you know who Randy Orton is? You know what I mean? Like, wrestling fans obviously know who these people are, but to the non-wrestling fan, they might not recognize Randy Orton right away. They might not recognize Edge right away just by their name. You know what I mean? John Cena, though, like, oh yeah, I think he's a wrestler, right? My nephew really likes him, or you know what I mean? Like that's what I mean. So John Cena was definitely at that level, and then after that you had Roman Reigns, and Roman Reigns has been the top guy for a long time now. But what this slide is focusing on is their first WrestleMania main event. Now I thought of we could talk about their first WrestleMania appearance period, or we could talk about their first WrestleMania victory, or we could talk about their first WrestleMania world title victory. But I wanted to focus specifically on the main event. Because like this matters mostly with Cena and Roman because Roman did not win the main event of WrestleMania 31. He did not win his first world title at WrestleMania 31. But that was his first main event. In fact, of the four of them, he's the only one to lose his first ever WrestleMania main event. John Cena, WrestleMania 22 was his first main event, but he actually won his first he won his first world championship at WrestleMania 21, but that was not in the main event. The main event of WrestleMania 21 was Batista versus Triple H. I remember this well because I remember watching WrestleMania 21 and 22. In fact, I never missed a single WrestleMania through any of the 20s. But that's what this slide is focusing on. These four guys who are undoubtedly the top stars in the way I was defining it. And I think we can all agree that through the history of WWF and WWE, these are the four top build talents of all the different eras, right? Where, through the WrestleMania era specifically, because if we're going before WrestleMania, that's a completely different era. But Hulk Hogan main evented the first WrestleMania. Like I said, WrestleMania was built on his shoulders. And we are going to get into their last main events, but the first WrestleMania main event for Hulk Hogan was WrestleMania 1, and he was 31 years old. Stone Cold Steve Austin's first WrestleMania was WrestleMania 14, and he was 33 years old, the oldest of the four here. John Cena, his first WrestleMania main event was WrestleMania 22, and he was 28 years old. But John Cena's birthday is in April, so he turned 29 like a couple weeks after that WrestleMania main event. But he technically main evented WrestleMania for the first time at 28, which is the youngest of these four. Roman Reigns' first WrestleMania main event was WrestleMania 31, and he was 29. So that gives us an average age of 30/31. So if you add up their ages, especially considering how close some of them were to having a birthday from those main events, etc., it comes out to somewhere between 30 and 31. So that's an important thing to know, that these top stars, their average age of their first main event at WrestleMania was 30 and 31 years old. An important thing to consider going into when we get into who the options are of the next in line. So coming back to these four, I want to talk about their last main event, and specifically their last scheduled main event at WrestleMania, because that's especially important for Hulk Hogan and Stone Cold Steve Austin. And we'll get into that as we go here. But Hulk Hogan's last scheduled WrestleMania main event, where he was being advertised as the main event going into WrestleMania, was WrestleMania 8, and he was 38 years old. Hulk Hogan main evented WrestleMania 9 the next year, but he was not advertised to main event WrestleMania that year. He was not scheduled to main event WrestleMania that year. It was an impromptu match during the course of the show, right? So Hulk Hogan's last advertised main event before the actual show was WrestleMania 8. The impromptu match at WrestleMania 9, I am not counting it because he was not being advertised as the main event that year. Stone Cold, and Hulk Hogan, his last advertised main event, WrestleMania 8, 38 years old. Stone Cold Steve Austin's last advertised main event of WrestleMania was WrestleMania 17, and he was 36 years old. Now, Stone Cold Steve Austin would come back late in the WrestleMania 30s to wrestle Kevin Owens in the main event of WrestleMania Night 1. Now, there's a couple things to consider here. Number one, that was so many years after his retirement, like decades after his retirement, and he was not, I can't say, oh, that was his last WrestleMania main event in terms of the subject of this video, because he wasn't the top guy through all those years, right? So like we can't just say, oh, like we can't just pretend like he was the top guy for that many decades when he wasn't. The second, and then technically speaking, that was also an impromptu match, even though that match had storyline and that match was being advertised as them being face to face, but that was also technically an impromptu match because they never technically advertised it as a match going into WrestleMania. But the other thing to consider is also this, is that I'm not sure I want to count night ones as WrestleMania main events, to be completely honest. Like, to me, now that WrestleMania is a 2-night event, I still consider like the very last match to be the main event, and his impromptu match with Kevin Owens was night 1, not night 2. So for all those different reasons, I'm not counting the Kevin Owens match. So for Stone Cold, his last scheduled and advertised main event of WrestleMania while he was the top guy was WrestleMania 17, and he was 36 years old. John Cena, now he could main event WrestleMania this year, but again, you know, if he wins the Royal Rumble and he ends up main eventing WrestleMania for his retirement match, for the sake of this video, we can't just pretend that he's been the top guy for all this long, because he hasn't been. John Cena hasn't been the top guy for 10 years now. Roman Reigns has. So John Cena could. I put a question mark beside WrestleMania 40 for Roman. I probably should have put the question mark beside WrestleMania 29 for Cena because um, he could win the Royal Rumble this year and main event WrestleMania 41 for his last ever WrestleMania. But as of now, and as of in the point of this video, his last WrestleMania main event was WrestleMania 29, where he was 35 years old. Roman Reigns, he could main event WrestleManias going forward. It's still possible he could main event WrestleMania 41. He could main event WrestleMania 42. Who knows? But as of right now, he last main evented WrestleMania last year, clearly, at WrestleMania 40, and he was 38 years old. But if you look at his age in comparison to the other three, he is already at the same age Hulk Hogan was for Hulk Hogan's last advertised main event. And if we want to count Hulk Hogan's impromptu main event, Hogan would have been 39, which is what Roman Reigns is now. So judging by his predecessors here, Roman Reigns is already at the age where it's probably time for WWE to start considering who their next top talent is. It's not only because of Roman's age himself, but just the fact that he's been in the WrestleMania main event scene for so long now. His time is probably done. And I mentioned this in my Royal Rumble video. And before people say, like, what do you mean his time is done? Listen, I think Roman Reigns is probably going to be wrestling at WrestleMania for the next 3 to 4 years before he probably starts missing them. I think Roman Reigns, you can probably guarantee he'll be wrestling at the next 3 to 4 WrestleManias before he starts seriously considering, a career in Hollywood or his post WWE career. Going into that transition phase of whether it is Hollywood or whether it is something else of, what's next for Roman Reigns. I think he can probably wrestle at the next 3 to 4 WrestleManias, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be in the main event, and that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be the top star for those matches, because John Cena has had matches in the WrestleMania 30s, but he wasn't the top star anymore. Roman Reigns was. So just because Roman Reigns could be wrestling for the next 3 to 4 WrestleManias doesn't mean he's going to be the top talent anymore. It doesn't mean he's going to be undisputedly the top guy. And like I said, if you look at this slide's age, Hulk Hogan, 38, Stone Cold, 36, Cena, 35, Roman already at 38. And what is the average age of this? Average age of 36/37, Roman is turning 40 this year. So if we can say that the average age of their last scheduled WrestleMania main event is 36/37, and Roman is turning 40 this year, it is seriously time to start considering who could be the next top talent. If I'm an executive in WWE, which I'm not, but if I was an executive in WWE, I would really be looking at who is next in line, which is what the main subject of this video is. I have one more slide, and we're going to talk about all the different possibilities on the exact same slide. I was thinking about breaking them up into several different slides, but I'm not going to do that. We're just going to throw them all onto one slide and start talking about who's next in line all together. But for me, I see 7 possibilities. One of them is kind of a cop-out, but it's important for me to mention it as a possibility. But I see 7 possibilities of who could be next in line. If through the history of the company there's been 4 main pillars as the top talents through the eras in Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, John Cena, and Roman Reigns through the WrestleMania era, who is going to be 5th in line? Well, I see 7 possibilities. So here I have 7 different possibilities. We're going to talk about each one. So let's start with the question mark because that's obviously the biggest cop-out. And the question mark represents somebody that we don't know, somebody that we're not thinking about in this conversation yet, somebody that we would never guess would be the top star right now. This could be somebody wrestling in Japan. This could be somebody wrestling in Europe. This could be somebody wrestling in Mexico. This could be somebody wrestling down on NXT. This could be somebody wrestling the indie circuit in North America. This could be somebody on the bottom of AEW's card. This could be somebody on the bottom of WWE's television card. It could be anybody. Anybody that we don't know, anybody that we're not thinking about in this conversation whatsoever. Is that a cop-out? Sure. But, before Stone Cold Steve Austin was Stone Cold Steve Austin, how many people thought he was going to be the next star in pro wrestling? If everybody thought of him as the next star in pro wrestling, WCW would have never fired him, right? So that just goes to show, not everybody is immediately thought of right away. Sometimes it takes a special someone to see, that potential, and not only for that someone to see that potential, but for the wrestler themselves to have their breakout moment. You know what I mean? So the question mark represents somebody that we're not even considering at this moment, someone we're not even thinking about. They could be anywhere in the world right now, but there's somebody that we're not necessarily thinking about in this conversation, but could still end up being the next in line. Is that a cop-out? Yes, but it's a real possibility, so I had to list it. Now let's talk about MJF. MJF is currently in AEW, and he is 28 right now, and he's turning 29 in the year of 2025. So he's about, right in line of that age of, we talked about the average age being 30/31 for Hogan, Austin, Cena, and Roman. MJF is getting close to that age range. And the thing with me and MJF is that, and some hardcore AEW fans, and I haven't watched AEW since CM Punk left, I'm going to be completely honest. So I have no idea how, I haven't watched AEW television since CM Punk has left. I've watched, some things here and there. But some hardcore AEW fans might get mad at me for saying this, but it seems that MJF is very stagnant now. It seemed like he really was on top of the world during that feud with CM Punk, and virtually everybody was like, this is a breakout star in the making right here. And, this kid could really be a huge star in the world of professional wrestling. And I remember when I watched that feud, I thought several things of MJF. I thought, this is a kid who is clearly comfortable on the mic. This is a kid who is clearly comfortable in the ring. This is a kid who's clearly found a look that works for him. He's found a niche that works for him. He's found a way to present himself that works for him. And he's found a character and overall presentation that works for him. And I thought, he did all of this on his own. He developed all this on his own. He developed this character on his own. He found all these skills on his own. He built himself basically as high as I thought he would ever be able to build himself. And when I watch, clips of MJF now, I think this is a guy who hasn't evolved since that feud with CM Punk. He hasn't reached that next level. And I think MJF's biggest mistake, and I don't know how real that whole contract, it being up in 2024 thing was, if it was all just, kind of buzzwords used on TV. And I don't really know how much talk he ever had with WWE. I don't know the actual scenario regarding his contract, but I'm sure he did have discussions with WWE, and I'm sure they did probably lowball him compared to what AEW was offering him. But he probably took the higher money in the short term with AEW, but it's really hurt his development, in my opinion, because, like I said, I think he built himself as high up as he could get on his own. And AEW, they don't have the team in place to really, break out and develop these talents, right? That company has no idea what they're doing with the talent that they have, and they don't have the people in place to really work with the younger talent especially and really develop them into something special. If MJF went to WWE, he probably would be making less money on that first deal with WWE than he was going to be making in AEW by quite a lot. I'm guessing he probably would have had to take a huge pay decrease, but he would be working with guys like Triple H, guys like Shawn Michaels, and all, the top agents that the WWE has, and all of these people that would really know how to bring him to the next level so that, as he moved up the card, those paychecks would start getting bigger, bigger, and bigger. And they would also be able to take what he has built for himself and help him mold that into something that, brings him to the next level. Because he very much has a character and a presentation that is like very mid card for mainstream and very top of the card for like indie, even though I know like he makes fun of indie wrestling as part of his character. There's just something that isn't quite there with MJF, even though he has all the skills. He has the skills, but there's something missing in his character and in his presentation to have that, top star mold. And I think he made a mistake by signing with AEW, because I think if he would have signed with WWE, he would be working with the team that company has that would be able to bring him to the next level. And I think he would be in very, very serious discussion for who would be next in line. If MJF, who is still can do it, he's still, a couple years younger than what that average age is, right? He clearly hasn't peaked because he hasn't left AEW, right? So if by any off chance MJF is watching this, I know I'm just a random guy on the internet to you, but seriously, the best thing you can do for your career is to get out of AEW as soon as you can, get over to WWE as soon as you can, and start working with, the teams that they have in place to help you reach, levels that you're just not going to, you're simply never going to reach in AEW, because one, the company isn't as big as WWE to reach those levels, but two, they don't have the team in place to help you develop yourself to reach those levels either. So the faster you get to WWE, the better it is going to be for you in the long term. You might be making less money in the short term, but you will make more money in the long term, and you will be a bigger and more notable star in the long term. I think MJF is probably the least likely of this group because he hasn't left AEW yet. If he had left AEW, he might be the most likely of this group, but right now he's the least likely simply because he's never left AEW. Let's say in 2025 he gets out of his deal with AEW and he makes the jump to WWE. Could he be next in line? Yeah, he could be. But, for him it's the sooner the better. And that's pretty much that's pretty much where I'll leave it off with MJF. Dominic Mysterio. He's 27 turning 28, so he's also getting close to that age of like it could happen in like the next couple years for Dom. Dom, for me, he has made that jump from being, when he first debuted, everybody looked at him as like, this kid doesn't have it. He doesn't have the look. He doesn't have the appeal. He's too generic. He's living off his dad's name. He broke away from all of that, and props to him, because now he's one of like the best mid-card talents they have. And that's what I want to say is, okay, you figured out how to be one of the top mid-card talents in the company. How are you going to be one of the top main event talents in WWE? Because I think he still needs to develop himself a bit, and I think he still needs to make some adjustments to himself a little bit to get to that main event level spot, right? Like, John Cena had, he went from being a very generic wrestler to being the doctor of thugonomics, right? It took him from the low card to the mid card when he made that change. And while he entered that feud with JBL as the doctor of thugonomics to win his first world championship, he never really became the top, the top main star of the company and the top of the main event until he went from being the doctor of thugonomics to the leader of C Nation, right? So John Cena had to still develop himself to reach that next level. And I think that's where we're at with Dom. It's like, okay, Dirty Dom has made you one of the best mid-card talents in the company. How are you going to become one of the best main event talents in WWE? And if Dominic Mysterio can figure that out, He could be next in line. He could be. Um, so yeah, that's where I'll leave it with Dom. Is okay. Dirty Dom is one of the best mid card talents in the company. How are you going to become one of the best main event talents in WWE? If you can figure it out, you could be next in line. Braun Breaker, 27, turning 28 in 2025, so same as Dominic Mysterio. And Braun Breaker, to me, is probably the most likely of the men on this slide to be the next person in line. And I think of the men on the bottom of this screen, he's probably the one that the company themselves see as potentially being that next in line. But he's got to figure it out, that there's a difference between being an incredible pro wrestler and being an incredible pro wrestling star, right? Like there's a difference between being, like he calls himself the badass, and he certainly is. He's got a badass look, he's got a badass personality, and he's badass to watch in the ring, and he's so explosive and athletic and gifted. He's going to be a phenomenal professional wrestler, but can he be a huge star, right? Can he find that gear as a star? You know, um, if I'm Braun Breaker, I'm hoping like crazy to be on John Cena's farewell tour. Like Braun Breaker needs to wrestle John Cena during John Cena's last year in WWE because he needs the experience of getting in there with a talent like a John Cena. He does. He needs to get in the ring with John Cena, and compete with him on television, on PLEs, but also chew the guy's brain out in real life while he's going through those matches, right? Like, when if Braun Breaker gets a program with Cena during Cena's farewell tour, he needs to spend as much time with John as he possibly can, chew his brain out, and be like, look, what do you see in me that I need to improve? Not what do you see in me that's good or great. What do you see in me that I need to improve? What do you see in me that I need to do to be better than what I am now? Braun Breaker, if he's going to be next in line, if I'm him, I'm going to, the writers, to the agents, to Triple H, to Nick Khan, to John Cena himself, and being like, can I work with John? I want to work with John. I need to get in the ring with John while he's here, while he's going to be wrestling. And, that's what I think Braun Breaker needs. He needs to get in the ring with somebody at that level of stardom, and he needs to learn from him so that he can figure out, okay, I can't be John Cena himself, but this is what I have in me that I can, unleash to get to the next level. Don't be John Cena, just learn from John Cena. That's what Braun Breaker needs. Logan Paul. He's 29 right now, and he's turning 30 this year. So he's pretty much like the exact age of like what the average age is, especially by, by 2026 and WrestleMania 42. The thing with Logan Paul is, he keeps saying he's going to be a full-time professional wrestler, but he's been saying that for a long time now, and he just hasn't been a full-time professional wrestler. He's still not on TV every week. Um, he's not wrestling at every single PLE, like he hasn't become that full-time professional wrestler that he keeps saying he is. And if he wants to be the top guy in WWE, he kind of has to be. Now we can talk about like the real world, economics of like whether or not, WWE full-time is the best economical decision for Logan Paul. It probably isn't. He probably could make more money doing other things than WWE, whether that's boxing, whether that's acting, whether that's launching companies with KSI, like whatever, right? Like or just doing his podcast or doing social media in general. Logan Paul probably could make more money outside of WWE than he could make inside WWE, because even top end talent is only making like, like it's hard for top end talent to even hit $10 million a year. and Logan Paul makes more than $10 million a year outside of WWE. So there's that to consider. But anyways, who cares about Logan Paul's economics? Can Logan Paul be the top star in WWE? It comes down to, in my opinion, a couple things. Number one, are you going to be a full-time pro wrestler? And number two, does the company want their next talent to be somebody who became a star outside of pro wrestling first? You know, like you look at Hogan, Austin, Cena, and Roman, all four of them became stars in the world of pro wrestling. Um, like none of them were stars before pro wrestling. You know what I mean? So Logan Paul would be new in that sense. Like he would be the first one in line if he does reach that level to because he would have been a star before WWE, right? Like a star before pro wrestling. And I wonder if WWE wants that. Like I think, and Logan Paul, he's not really, the novelty's kind of worn off of Logan Paul in WWE at this point. Like he's just kind of part of the roster for most fans at this point, right? And I think most people who know who Logan Paul is, I'm sure most of them know or have seen, him wrestle in WWE at this point. So has, the whole Logan Paul thing in WWE peaked? That ultimately comes down to, you know, if he does become a full-time pro wrestler, can he start doing things inside WWE that takes away from the fact that, oh, this is Logan Paul in WWE? No, okay. Let's get away from that. Let's start doing things on the TV that we are most interested in because of what you're doing now, not because of what your name is and who you are. You know what I mean? So Logan Paul, he has the following and he has the stardom outside of pro wrestling to be at that level. But I need to see you become Stone Cold Steve Austin in wrestling, not become Stone Cold Steve Austin outside of wrestling. So that's my biggest challenge to Logan Paul. If he's going to be next in line, it's like, okay, don't be Stone Cold Steve Austin outside of WWE. Be Stone Cold Steve Austin inside of WWE. And how are you going to do that? You are a self-made man. You've made yourself as famous, and you've built your following. You've gotten everywhere you've gotten on your own accord. Okay, so how are you going to reach those levels in WWE? What are you going to do in WWE to reach those levels in the company? I think Logan Paul is probably, of these 7 choices, I would say MJF is 7th. The question mark is probably 6th. No, I'll say this. I'll say MJF is 7th. I'll say Dominic is probably 6th. I'll say the question mark is 5th, and I'll probably put Logan Paul at 4th. I think both of the women are probably above him, and I think Braun Breaker is above him. So I think of the 3 that are most likely, it's going to be either one of the 2 women or Braun Breaker. But I'll put Logan Paul in the middle of this at 4. But that's where I'll leave it off with Logan Paul is. Don't be Stone Cold Steve Austin or John Cena or Hulk Hogan or Roman Reigns outside of pro wrestling. Be those guys inside of pro wrestling. How are you going to do it? If you can figure it out, you could be next in line. Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, John Cena, Roman Reigns, all men. The WWE has never truly had a woman as the face of the company. Pro wrestling has never truly had a woman as the face of the sport. It's never happened. But I think the WWE has done a fantastic job of recruiting actually talented women to their roster, where it's not just they have, through my history watching wrestling, you would at most have maybe 3, 4, maybe 5 women who were decent enough to go have matches and have like actual good matches. And then the rest of, the women in the company were there as eye candy and there as like, filler spots, right? Like they could wrestle like, 5, 6 minutes here and there. But in terms of like women who could actually do the job, you would have like maybe five at most, right? Like, in the Attitude Era, you had Trish Stratus and you had Lita and you had Ivory and you had Jazz, um, you had Jacqueline. In the Ruthless Aggression Era, you had Trish and Lita still. You had Melina. You had Mickey James, you had Beth Phoenix, and then a little bit after that you had Michelle McCool come in. Um, you know what I mean? But there wasn't like that's it. Like after that, it's slim pickings. Now that's not the case. The WWE right now has so many women that are fantastic at the job, which helps these two at the top of this slide. Is if you're going to be the face of the company, you're going to need to have people you can work with for 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe even up to 10 years, right? You can't just be working with the same people over and over and over and over again, right? It's like Trish Stratus, outside of Lita, who did she have to work with? That's why Trish Stratus, no matter how great she was, would never ever could have been the face of the company because outside of Lita, she had nobody to work with. That's no longer the case. Right now in WWE, you have, easily 12 to 15, maybe even more than that, women who can go out there and have killer matches. Like you probably have they have women Royal Rumbles every year now, where they have 30 different women in the match, and those women Royal Rumble matches are pretty damn good. So right there, that's saying that every year they have at least 30 women who can go. So which means that women's wrestling has been legitimized in WWE. It's been legitimized throughout the world. Pro wrestling and WWE are now in a place where they could realistically have a woman as the face of the company because one, they will have enough people to work with for several years. Number two, women have already main evented WrestleMania. That's already happened. That barrier has already been broken. They have women's world championships. The women's world titles are looked at as legitimate world titles. That barrier has been broken. And the women in general in WWE are now looked at as pro wrestlers rather than, just eye candy. So all those barriers have already been broken. The last barrier to really truly be broken is, can a woman be the face of the company? Can a woman be the face of pro wrestling? And I think there are two right now in the company that have that potential. To be the top star, you need to check every single box. There are so many boxes that you need to hit to be the top talent to WWE. Presentation, and in presentation, that's how do you dress, how do you walk, how do you make your entrance, what's your entrance music, what's your attire in the ring, what's your attire backstage, what's your merchandise look like. All that is presentation. Then there's charisma, you know how do you look on a poster? How do you talk with the microphone? How do you use your body posture and body language as a character? All that is charisma. There's the look. Okay, can I put your face on a poster? Can I put your body on a poster? Can I put you on the big production trucks? Then there's obviously in-ring work. How athletic are you in the ring? How good of a worker are you in the ring? How good is your psychology and storytelling in the ring? There are so many boxes that you need to check to be the top star in the company. And I don't think Tiffany Stratton or Jade Cargill checks every single box, but both of them are working with top people in the company, and the company is investing so much in both of them to check off as many boxes as absolutely possible. Now, Tiffany Stratton seems to be turning into everything they were hoping Jade Cargill would turn into when they first brought her in. Tiffany Stratton is breaking out really fast. She's getting really over, and she has an incredible look. Both like a look that works for women, a look that works for men. in terms of like men being a fan of her, women being a fan of her, but also a look that works as a pro wrestler. Like she's pretty big. Like she's pretty big for a woman, not as big as Jade Cargill, but she's pretty big, right? She's got an athletic look, she's got a beauty look, she's got a feminine look, but she's also got, an athletic look. She's got all that works. She's getting really good in the ring, she's getting really good on the mic. She has a strong character that works for her. And look at her age. She's 25, turning 26. She's younger than all four. She's the youngest person on this screen, but she's also younger than all four of Cena, Roman, Austin, and Hogan were when they first main evented WrestleMania. So if she gets a main event in the next year or two, like if she main events WrestleMania 42 or WrestleMania 43, she'll break all four of those guys' ages in terms of when they main evented WrestleMania. So she's got youth on her side, and she's checking off so many boxes already if she continues to check all of them off. And that's the other thing. She hasn't even close to peaked yet. That's another thing to consider is have you peaked as a performer, or how close are you to peaking as a performer? And she's not even close to peaking. She still has so much further she can go. Could Tiffany Stratton be the next face of professional wrestling? I'm not saying no. Let's just say that. I'm not saying no. I'm not saying right now undisputedly that she will be, but I'm not saying no. Jade Cargill, a year ago I thought she was the next person in line. If I made this video a year ago, I would have flat out predicted she's next in line. She's the next Roman Reigns. Like, she is next in line. She's going to be the face of this company for many, many years. She's not checking off all those boxes as fast as she needs to, and she, unlike Tiffany, does not have age on her side. In fact, she's turning 33 this year, which was the age that Stone Cold was, who was the oldest of the four of Hogan, Austin, Cena, Roman. Austin was the oldest one of the four to main event WrestleMania for the first time at age 33. And Jade will not hit that because she's not going to main event WrestleMania 41. The earliest she could possibly main event WrestleMania is WrestleMania 42, which she'll be 34 at the time. So age is not on her side. If Jade is going to be next in line, she needs to main event WrestleMania 42. It's as simple as that. She needs to main event WrestleMania 42, which means that, who do you see as a potential woman she can face in the main event? Maybe Tiffany across the screen from her here, maybe Bianca Belair, maybe Rhea Ripley. Like, to me, that's like the three options. Like, she would have to main event against either Tiffany Stratton, Rhea Ripley, or Bianca Belair. Are those matches big enough to be a WrestleMania main event? That depends on Jade. That depends on, what she does through the rest of 2025 when she returns from injury. I'm hoping she's back in time for WrestleMania this year. I'm thinking she probably is back in time for WrestleMania this year. Maybe she'll be an entrant in the Royal Rumble. Like, maybe she'll be a surprise entrance in the Royal Rumble this Saturday. And if she is, and, she does well in it, and she, we'll see. But of this page, this slide, I would say she's third most likely, because I do think she has the most important boxes are boxes she already checks off, and she simply just looks like a huge star. And I think the company did envision her as being, at least their top female star for, the next while when they brought her in. We'll see what she does. This is a big, huge year for Jade Cargill. It really is. That this, to me, is a make or break year for her, 2025, because she's the oldest person on this slide, and she's going to be older than all four of Hogan, Austin, Cena, and Roman were when they first became, the top star in the company, when they first main evented WrestleMania. So this is a make or break year. Can she get over to that level this year? Can she start checking off the boxes that she's not already checked off? Can she Main Event WrestleMania 42 in 2026. We shall see. Again, if I made this video 1 year ago, I would have said she was the most likely person to be next in line. That has dropped for me. I would put Tiffany above her right now for a few reasons. And I said earlier that I put Braun at 3, or like I said that I put them at the top 3. I would say Jade is probably 3, Braun is probably 2, and I'd probably put Tiffany at number 1 in terms of who's most likely on this list. And I think a lot of that is, I think WWE might be best served at their next, top of the line talent being a woman, just for variety's sake, and just for, changing it up a little bit and giving the WWE a little bit of a different flavor. And like I said, the women have already broken down so many barriers now that I don't think it's out of line for the next person in line to be a woman, and I don't think their viewership will be hurt by that. If anything, it might benefit from that. But that's a whole different discussion for a different time. But these are my 7 choices. 1, someone that we don't know. MJF if he gets out of AEW. Dominic Mysterio if he figures out how to go from mid-card character to main event character. Braun Breaker if he can work with somebody like a John Cena and learn, what he needs to improve inside himself to reach that level. Logan Paul if he becomes a full-time star and figures out how to be a star in pro wrestling, not just outside of it. Jade Cargill if she starts ticking off those boxes and has a really, really big 2025. And Tiffany Stratton, I would say, is the most likely at this point. What does Tiffany need to do to become the top star in the company? I think for her, it's continue on the trajectory you're going, but also find yourself an opponent that WWE has no choice to say, okay, that's a WrestleMania main event, right? Like Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock at WrestleMania. They main evented WrestleMania twice because it was like the two of them got so big that they had to main event WrestleMania twice in such a short time frame, right? Same with Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns, like the last 2 years, is that Roman and Cody both got so hot that like they couldn't do anything other than those matches. Tiffany needs to continue her rise, but also find a woman on the roster to work with where the WWE realizes this has to be our WrestleMania main event. And maybe that's Jade Cargill. Maybe it's Jade. Maybe it's Rhea Ripley. Maybe it's Bianca Belair. Who knows? Maybe that is a WrestleMania 42 main event, though. Maybe if Jade and Tiffany, maybe they both find a fire inside them to become the next person in line, and maybe they both get so hot through the year of 2025 that going into 2026 and the Royal Rumble of 2026, WWE is like, this is our main event of WrestleMania 42. So if Tiffany can find that next level, but also find an opponent where the WWE's like, this has to be our main event, and then Tiffany ends up coming out on top of that, maybe that's her ticket to being next in line, and maybe that is her way of becoming the next top star in WWE. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that video. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you think any of these 6 people on this slide could be a top star in the WWE or the next person in line. And if you're going with question mark, the 7th option, who in the wrestling world that we're not considering yet do you think has the possibility of being the next top star in not just WWE, but in the entire world of pro wrestling, at the level of a Hulk Hogan, at the level of a Stone Cold Steve Austin, at the level of a John Cena, and at the level of a Roman Reigns? Let me know your thoughts. Royal Rumble is this Saturday. We'll see what happens. I do have a video on my channel of 13 possible Royal Rumble winners. I'm still standing by that video for the most part. I think there are 2 names in that video that I didn't mention, and it is mostly because I kind of just forgot to mention them, to be completely honest. One One was Jey Uso, who I don't think is going to win the Royal Rumble. The other was Sami Zayn, who before the last couple of weeks I would have thought was not winning the Royal Rumble either. But the way Sammy's been booked on Raw the last couple of weeks, he's turning into a pretty big sleeper pick to win the Royal Rumble, in my opinion. But in that video, I'll just say who you can click on my channel and watch that video if you want. But I did pick Drew McIntyre to win the Royal Rumble. I'm staying with that pick for now. I do think he's got a good chance. But of the 13 names in that video, there were 2 names I forgot to mention. One was Jey Uso. I don't think Jey's winning the Royal Rumble. And the other was Sami Zayn. Sami, I would say he's probably got to be favorite status at this point. Not super favorite and not the favorite, but I think he's got to be one of the people favored to win now. I think the most likely winners are Drew McIntyre, John Cena, Randy Orton, CM Punk, and I'll say Sami Zayn. I'll say those 5. Logan Paul is in there as well, so I'll say those 6. I'll say those 6 are most likely. I don't think Roman Reigns wins it. I don't think Seth Rollins wins it. I doubt The Rock's even going to be in the Royal Rumble. So, yeah. Anyways, Royal Rumble's this Saturday. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'll talk about the show after. We'll see. We'll see if I want to. But this video was who's next in line, and let me know if you think any of these on this slide are the next talents in line. Thank you for watching this video.